Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this month's Grid Talk. We've got a practical session lined up for this one. It's just really helping you focus on how you build world-class project delivery methods and playbooks. And we just thought it'd be really good to give back and sort of share our experiences of what we've done with you guys and our clients. So yeah, really fun session. But as always with Grid Talk, it's going to be quite a lot to get through. So for those that are new to Method Grid or new to what Grid Talk is, one of the things that we wanted to build, or one of the outcomes for Method Grid, was that we wanted to build a really robust client community focused on how we share best practice on the topic of sort of P3M, capability build and development. I appreciate if you're new to Livestorm, then you'll see on the right hand side you've got chat and questions. So please, feel free to ask us questions, and there'll be time at the end of the event that we can cover that. I suppose one of the things would be, on the topic of playbooks and P3M capability build, just try and think of that for the topic of your question and when we come to it at the end. Okay. Just as a quick signpost, we kind of mix up Grid Talks. A lot of you enjoy listening to the experiences that clients have gone on and how they use the platform, versus plus also kind of the knowledge share that we give back. And one advisory joined our not our senior user forum, sorry, our quarterly summit last week, and met all the developers and the team. It's really nice that we always try and connect clients with the development team. And it's a really interesting use case. They use Method Grid for their delivery and retained services to their clients. But it's the first one where we've transitioned from just traditional task management to moving towards more integrated knowledge and project management together. So Ange from One Advisory will be joining us in August. So and I think Tom will be putting the link on for you to register to that one. Okay. First of all, I think I've seen the list that's joining. I think most of you know me. If you don't, I'm Pip Morpeth, and I'm the head of professional services for Method Grid. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by someone that I work with every day, who's probably one of the most talented consultants we have. So Alice, you want to give a short introduction?
Hello, yeah, I'm Alice. I'm a senior consultant within Pip's team, professional services. So you'll be hearing from me about what I see with clients.
Cool. Right, just a quick bit of background. And look, the shared problem that we are all trying to solve is this one, is how do we help teams be more consistent in project and service delivery and try and remove the cost of poor quality? I won't go through all of this slide, and some of you have been through it before, but if you look at the pain points between 1 to 8, I'm sure some of them will resonate with you if you work in project delivery or in professional services. Obviously, some are more pertinent than others, but the so what is what we try and focus on. There's 4 key sort of components that we think contribute to that problem. First one is that you've got to provide people with clarity on method and approach. Second one is you've got to find a way of having confidence that approach people have been compliant with and they're following it. I think also you've got to kind of ensure that people can actually use it and tailor it and take ownership for it, for being compliant. Point 3 is the kind of the basics sort of people capability. You've got to ensure that people have got the right, there's job descriptions, there's grades, there's competencies, there's career development. Also, how well have we integrated learning, knowledge, and training to build that capability? And also, probably what we also look for is, how well does that skill community of practice actually drive improvements into the ways of working? And I think a lot of that will come in today's session. There's a few topics that we've got on the sort of people capability build aspects. And then for the final point is, in program project delivery, you're always going to have, it's always risky. So there'll always be audit and assurance. And what we look for is, look, how well is audit and assurance requirements actually fed into the method? And the second point is, how well are they actually integrated into the teams? So that's the problem, and that's the 4 key pillars that we look for. If you've never seen or used Method Grid before, very quickly, it's a AI-empowered knowledge and project management platform. And what the platform allows you to do is, the first point at the top there is, you can develop, maintain, and improve your enterprise playbooks. Once you've built them, you can then clone those playbooks and create them for specific project instances. Assign them to teams, track delivery. And we added the little brain on the top right there, as also what the instances allow you to do is allow teams to actually tailor it and right size it for the particular project or the particular client. And that's really important if you want people to take ownership of the ways of working and deliver it. Once you've obviously created that instance, you can then assure its delivery. You can track what the controls are, stage gates, and report in to give you assurance that the method's been followed appropriately. But the key thing is, what you can then do, learning from all of those different instances you've created, is drive improvements back into your original enterprise playbook. And that's really what we're trying to enable with Method Grid, is that continuous improvement loop, so that teams can find improvements, work out what they want to add, and change their enterprise playbook so that the next iteration benefits from that experience. Right, so for today, and building world-class project delivery methods and playbooks, what we thought we'd do first is, we call it sort of laying the foundation. And it's really important to do this, is what we want to do is sort of talk about what are the key things or things you need to think about first before you want to start building like project program delivery playbooks. Because if you jump straight into building playbooks, you can get a little bit lost at sea if you haven't got the foundations in place. So I'm going to run through laying the foundations, and then Alice is going to run us through, okay, well, in practicality then, how do we actually then start building playbooks and some of the guidance and lessons learned that we've learned. I think on this section here, we're not going to, the outcome is what we want to help clients achieve, but it's not going to be achieved in 60 minutes. We will run further sort of grid talk sessions on the topic. We are going to share more resources and toolkits that we use with clients. So a lot of feedback from our clients at the last Senior User Forum was they found some of the slides and the toolkits we use really helpful in their implementation. So we'll make them available for you. We've got obviously the Senior User Forum in October. There are already a few new AI prototypes that are quite interesting. Star Trek mode was probably something to look forward to in October. But also we'll continue with doing industry research projects. We'll finalize practice this month. Probably next week we'll talk about what we're up to with Network Rail and PACE. And also there's other bodies that want to put their methods into the platform. So at least you kind of got a base to build off your enterprise playbook from. Okay. There's a lot to get through. So I'm just going to go through. So laying the foundations. What we've done is we've broken this down into sort of 5 key components and this is kind of pre-thinking that you need to do with teams before you want to start building playbooks. Some of it's fairly straightforward and everyone's going to know it, but we just thought we just pull it all together and just go through it. Okay. So first one, hierarchy and patterns. It's really simple, but actually makes a lot of value. And what we're trying to say here is, what makes a lot of difference is helping build your own enterprise glossary on how things are. So, we really want to avoid the pointless conversations on what can be, what's a program, what's the difference between a program and a project, what's a portfolio. What we're trying to do is codify all that language. If there's standard definitions like what's a risk, what's an issue, is try and build up that enterprise glossary. And really, we're just trying to make it really easy. So if new people join your organization, there's no lost in translation. It's quite easy for them to understand. I mean, what we do try and push here is say, look, don't try and reinvent the wheel. Try and follow and align with best practice. And some of the probably the most valuable definitions that we've helped clients with is the bottom one, which is helping people work out the difference between project versus BAU change. It can be, in some organizations, it can be like 50 shades of gray. And what we're trying to do is just try and bring it down and say, actually, how you'll never get it quite close to black and white, but really help teams to work out and understand when project governance actually becomes enforced, and give them criteria and definition for that. Okay. The hierarchy is useful. And one of the toolkits we have developed is what we call is like the patterns toolkit. And really this just helps teams help them apply that hierarchy to their program and project. And they can use it to describe, it normally goes into like your PMP or your PID or PDP. And it's basically a way of allowing you to design your project or program, but using the hierarchy pattern that you've designed. And it's really helpful in the basics of just helping teams understand governance. So what's the up and down flow that they need to be? So what program do I belong to? What portfolio do I report to? And you can see in the example, it also helps, and you'll see lots of topics on it on LinkedIn. I see it a lot, and is you can use it to describe different ways of delivery. So, you can say, look, here's the waterfall pattern, here's the agile pattern. Look, yeah, you call it work package product, we call it sprint and feature, you call it project stage, we call it project increment, but you can still apply the hierarchy for those individuals to understand how you can apply it in different contexts. Okay, so this is probably one of the toolkits that we'll make available, because it is useful for teams, and it's a reusable resource. Right, classification. I think everyone knows you need it. Whilst programs and projects all share the same characteristics, they're not all as risky as others. There's different levels of complexity, risk, and therefore the controls, the governance, and the assurance that you want to apply needs to be both relevant and appropriate to it. I think our guidance on this is you're trying to make classification easy to understand and really easy to apply, and the trick is really keep it simple. I'd be really surprised. I'd say if you're between 3 and 4 classifications is probably what you need. I think if you're into the range of like 10, it just becomes really complex and overbearing. What we have found that has made it really useful is actually defining the decision rights about who has actually got the decision rights to actually classify programs or projects under their classification, because you're always going to want to try and catch people that are trying to smuggle projects through as light when they should be standard. But also, when it comes to classifying major programs, that's significantly going to increase the amount of controls, the amount of assurance activities and costs that are going to be relevant to that program. So one of the tools we found really useful is Rapid. You may have come across it in previous life, but it's a Bain framework for helping codify decision rights and making decisions. It's really useful for decision rights for programs, projects, and for classification. Okay. But trick on classification is keep it simple. Obviously, the life cycle. The key to driving consistency and removing variation is trying to design a standard life cycle and set of gateways that you can universally apply to all programs and projects. Naturally, you're going to face the world where some industry bodies will have specific stages and gates. That's fine, but it is actually quite easy to translate your own life cycle onto their frameworks. And we've done that with a few clients to say, look, you've got your own language that you want to use internally, and this is how it translates if you want to use REBA or if you use an IPA. It's very simple and easy to understand how those life cycles can be applied and how they interface with your method. But obviously, life cycle is key, because in terms of designing the playbook, it's going to design the sort of left to right flow of how we're going to guide people through the project life cycle. And we'll probably post this toolkit, sort of a way of illustrating your life cycle. So obviously we look for stages, gateways, assurance reviews, investment gates. And then we put themes. Now, themes are probably a little bit more emotional when it comes to defining themes. So I'll come on to themes. So for themes, they're naturally going to shape the sort of swim lanes of your playbook. And I think we're all used to them. It's kind of, the ongoing things that you need to do as you go through the program project life cycle. But aligning themes and being consistent with them across both project, program, and portfolio management is really key. And even Axelos, if you MOP, MSP, Prince 2, it's confusing. They call things something different. What we tend to see now is predominantly most themes that are engineered for playbooks are more closely aligned with PMI and APM. And because they are quite a logical set of scope management, cost management, etc. They're actually quite a logical setting. The key with themes is, first of all, you've got to try and demonstrate that you are aligned with best practice. For both employees and end clients, you've got to demonstrate coverage and heritage against best practice. And that also, people are going to look at it and they're going to want to make sure that, okay, this method is fully usable. It's got all of the components I need to be able to use. So it's also about building confidence that people can actually use it. Probably the most valuable slide that we've ever built is the smaller one there and it's worth spending time, is once you've defined what you think your themes are and what sources of information you're going to use to build them, just spend 45 minutes with the team on just agreeing what belongs to what. There's a few gotchas, like where does change control sit? Does it sit in risk and issue management, or does it sit in scope management? All of those decisions, you'll have conversations about, but really it doesn't really matter where they live. It's just as long as you're consistently trying to put it and where we have put it in terms of your playbook, okay? The reason we put that in place is when you want to start codifying and building your playbook, it just helps people navigate it. So people get used to, okay, I know what the themes are about. I know where to look for things, but also it stops teams duplicating. What we find is, if you start building and designing playbooks, you'll find people have put stuff in different swim lanes. So the key bit of focus on that one is just spend time on documenting the themes and be able to trace heritage so that you've got full coverage and completeness. And also don't focus on, you don't need to rename something for the sake of renaming something. Risk and issue management is risk and issue management. It's more important that you focus on the how you do it rather than what. Job family. So we find this is really useful for playbook development. Naturally, we're going to want to use standard role names. So if we're describing things in the playbook, it's really helpful if you've got RACI or if you've got quality responsibilities that you're using standard roles that align with the job family. And the job family is, here's our roles, here's our grades, here's the set of competencies, here's the career path, the glide path that we want to put in place. It can evolve into sort of the recruitment process and the guidelines for recruitment for that. But also, and I'm sure for some of you may be becoming quite familiar with the phrase, license to operate is now becoming a much more sort of common control in program and project delivery. So once you've defined your classification, it's linking the classification framework with the job family to say, well, only certain grades should work on certain types of projects. So if you're a major program director, you need to be project director grade 2, and that's the classification that you can work on. If you're grade 1 or 2 or grade 1 to 3 project manager, you can work on the lower grade classification. That's not about what this is about in using the classification for that. It's not about not giving people the opportunity to work on stretching objectives for different grades of project, but it's certainly making sure that you're not blind to putting people on projects without understanding the competencies that they have, because it creates a unique risk. So there's a lot of drive on competency management systems. I'm sure if there's anyone from local government on, there's Ghost, which is that platform. Network Rail will use Camille, and it's competency management is becoming much more critical in program project delivery. I think we have a partnership with Camille, and I think they'll come to our sort of senior user forum to sort of share their world. So yeah, look forward to that one in October. Training and development. So, this is just about understanding how we induct, train, and maintain that skill community of practice. And look, it's a combination of both structured, on-demand, and coaching and support. People will talk about the 70, 20, 10 model. That's fine, but all we're trying to do is ensure that we're making life as easy as we can for people to be successful by giving them all of the knowledge and training assets they need to deliver. And the reason that's important for building playbooks is the playbook itself is going to play a role in that learning journey for individuals. So working out and making sure that people understand, what knowledge and content are we going to put in the playbook? Are we going to put hints and tips, lessons learned, experts they can speak to, video explainers, exemplar templates? But also then, how do we actually connect the playbook with the sort of structured courses that we provide people? And what we definitely do see now is it's not the trend that you go away for 5 days on a project management course. It's becoming much more modularized and much more sort of university style of learning, that there are specific modules that you need to complete, and you pick and choose based on your career. Where do you want to go? That's the pathway that we'd recommend, and these are the modules that you need to complete. Okay. The key bit is, before you get into playbook build, is really understanding the role of what the playbook is going to actually do and how best to signpost learning resources within it. And then the final point, which we all sort of will wince a bit, is standards. You can't get away with it. At some point, you've got to define what your policy and standards are for program project delivery within the organization. You'll need to define what the guardrails are, the sort of minimum standards that you want people to comply with and follow. What we recommend is that the key is, once you've put the foundations in place, is try and thread it. Allow the standards to thread through hierarchy, classifications, life cycle, theme, job family throughout the standards. Make it really integrated. But I think the most pertinent point is, what we recommend is a minimum set of mandatory requirements, like the guardrails. Probably where we want you to focus is more on guidance and assurance than saying, really making it too rigid. That's not really what people need. Is they feel too rigid, too constrained, I can't use it, and simply they won't comply with it. Also, you'll see how you can start weaving in the classification framework into standards. So that table there, look, you might have different classifications of project. You might have a whole raft of deliverables that need to be completed that are part of your playbook. But only certain ones of them become mandatory, some can be scaled down, and some can be totally discretionary. And it's really right sizing and building that framework. So standards are the kind of things that are going to actually enforce what you want people to do. But our sort of focus is try and make that more guidance and assurance with a minimum set of guardrails that are required for it. Right, so that I think covers all of the elements that we sort of, if we were doing method grid implementation, these are the kind of things that we look for in terms of laying the foundations. Because Alice, I think if you want to move it on, I think you're going to now try and bring that to life in how we then translate all of that into playbooks.
Yes, I am. I'm already skipping ahead. There we are. So thanks, Pip. So you've heard about the foundations. As Pip says, I am here to give you a bit of an overview about actually how does that look like when we start building playbooks. So we'll start this journey a bit about how we actually go about forming the content and building out that content development process. So looking about how we go about combining best practice with insight and information from SMEs within your organization. And then we'll actually just take a step back and say, actually, well, what is a playbook? We've both been talking about it, and it's the name of the GRIDtalk. What actually is a playbook, and what are the different types of playbook that we see? And then we will finally look at what's our kind of grid blueprint. What's our quick tips, lessons learned, grid building 101 that we can really help impart upon you to set you off on the right track to start building out your playbook. And then finally, we'll just end by bringing this all to life to show how, by laying the foundations correctly and in a logical way, you can really weave that into your playbook, and we'll show you what that can look like within Method Grid itself. Okay, so content development process. A playbook cannot be built by a single person alone. It's one of those things that could be just too overwhelming, too much work, and would take ages, months, years perhaps. So what we generally like to do is build on best practice. As Pip mentioned earlier, why reinvent the wheel? Best practice is there because it's been honed over years and years of experience from previous project professionals. This best practice could range from P3M standards, from Prince 2, MSP, but also to really industry specific. So
I think the challenge.
Sorry, Pip.
Yeah, no, so Alice, I think the challenge is always, there's so much out there, but it's actually working out how are we actually going to translate that into something that people can practically use, and that's the skill and the art for doing that.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely an art. I think the real benefit of building on that best practice is that it sets that initial kind of baseline. So it's really recognizable for people, so that when, you've got a trainee just finished qualifications, or someone coming into an organization that might have come from somewhere else, it's a bit easier for them to adopt and use that method is if they can recognize bits of it. Also, it accelerates the whole process for you. So then once we've got that kind of understood, the best practice layer, it's then we can start building on it with SMEs and your organization's IP. So we find that by starting with that best practice, one thing we really want to avoid is that writer's block. No one likes to sit down staring at a blank sheet of paper, trying to define in their eyes what their organization's way of running projects is. So by getting that as a starting point, and then you can then piece together the experience, expertise, knowledge from specific SMEs to try and bring all that together. I mean, one thing that we see, and Pip, you'll agree with me, is that it really needs kind of an orchestrator, someone who can just really manage that collation and sorting of information from around an organization.
Yeah, I don't think you can underestimate. Some people will thrive on it. The opportunity, and it is a great opportunity to be able to codify your enterprise way of delivering a particular service. It's a great opportunity. But for some people, you're sat there looking at a blank piece of paper. They're kind of worried about, oh, what if I get it wrong? What will people say about me? So there's that kind of emotional side. And I think, Alice, you put the bin on, which is kind of what we're seeing is when you're going through all of the knowledge asset information that organizations actually have. Actually, in some cases, they've got loads, but it's, some of it's junk, some of it's just not relevant. And it's kind of what you have to try and do is trawl through that and try and work out, what are the best exemplars that we want to actually put forward? So, but you have to combine both, because you want it to be your enterprise, and you've got to leverage your IP and knowledge. Otherwise, it's just you're just a Prince 2 shop. So I think you have to combine and stitch the two together to be able to build that playbook. Yeah,
definitely. And as Pip mentioned, it's an art. It is definitely one that you can, there's no right or wrong to any of this. Okay, so playbooks. I actually Googled what is the dictionary definition of a playbook, and it came back with a collection of plays that you have in football, guides that then lead to you being able to work out how you would do a play. And I was like, well, okay, we're not a football team, but actually the principles behind what that dictionary definition of a playbook is what we use here. So a playbook to us, and when we ever talk about it, is a collection of guidance, tools, templates aligned to a particular method, so particular stages that then enable you to deliver something. So that's kind of not football, but it's related to projects. And then we have kind of 3 different categories of playbooks that we draw upon. The first one is a toolkit. So the toolkit is a set of deliverables that are aligned to a particular project lifecycle and have gates at each of those individual stages. But then if we move on to the method is a build on that toolkit. So a method is the end-to-end journey for a user. So it includes the deliverables against that lifecycle, but it also includes the activities. So the activities is actually how do you go about delivering that particular playbook. And then the final one is knowledge. So knowledge is a particular policy or procedure or process that needs to be outlined just so you've got a bit more information. Those same things, it could be guidance, it could be links to external references, but it's more focused around a particular functional requirement. We generally see most people start thinking they want a toolkit, but actually during that initial kind of setting up the foundation stage, that actually we generally move more towards the method. So we end up with most of our clients building out a method, so activity and deliverables combined. When we start getting into the more kind of complicated methods, we then actually see the knowledge playbook coming into the fold as well. So the knowledge playbook can then be used to further define and describe a particular activity that sits within a method, which can then link out. So you then start to become, it then starts to become this kind of ecosystem of playbooks that you've got housed within your arsenal that you can then draw upon. The one thing that is the final consideration is whether it's an internal versus externally focused playbook. So if it's internal, so it's for internally delivering your projects, it might have a slightly different tone, might be laid out slightly differently to if it was an externally focused playbook that you're delivering projects on behalf of a client. So that's also something we have that initial conversation with upfront to understand, okay, what is the purpose of this playbook? Who is the audience? Who is it for? So here is our playbook blueprint, we like to call it, but it's a bit of our guidelines 101 lessons learned that we've picked up that we've now pulled together to help you really accelerate your build. One thing that we really have to stress is that look and feel really do matter. It's one of those things that if it doesn't look aesthetically pleasing, then people have an instant resistance to adopt, and they're less likely to use it because they don't feel that they automatically, can interact with it. So here in the blueprint, you can see I've got two dotted lines. So those 2 dotted lines are kind of separate the grid into 2 sections. Along the top and the horizontal and the vertical are the guidance elements. Those are here in a teal colour. These are kind of information only elements that set the context for that particular theme and stage. So we really advocate the use of these guidance elements because it really sets the scene for the individual and provides them with that just high level understanding. So it could be that it's an element that outlines the risk management process. So within the rest of the grid, you wouldn't get a chance to explain what your organization's risk management process is, but within that guidance element, you can. So it's really just establishing that initial understanding. And then as you move to the right, this is where your workflow of your method really kicks in. So this is where you include your activities and your deliverables aligned to each of your individual stages and themes. So if you can really look closely at the screen, you can see that there's a little bit of a codex in front of the element name. So working with clients, it's something that we established early on because what this is a unique identifier. So if you're working with a method that could involve, up to 300, 400 different elements, it's a real quick way of understanding where what deliverable do you mean? What activity do you mean? How do you link those two together? So it's a real clear, simple, quick win that means that you can improve people's user journey. The second thing that we really notice is, and it's a term we're trying, I'm not sure whether I like it, is section bloat. And they might have eaten too much bread, but we don't know. But this is where we see too many elements sat within a particular theme and stage, corresponding stage. So we don't want people scrolling for ages to try and find the bits of information they need. No one's going to enjoy that particular process. So we try and say, maximum of about 9 elements, give or take. And if you've got too many, then it's a conversation about, do you need another theme? Can those elements be consolidated somehow? Or it works the other way. If there aren't enough elements that sat in a particular theme, can we look at consolidating themes completely to make sure to reduce the size of the overall method? So what we're trying to do here is keep it as simple as possible and as usable as possible. So we're reducing the barriers to entry as much as we can. As I said at the beginning, colour is key. One of the longest debates we have with clients generally is around the colour palette. We have in the past had to bring our designer into the conversation to give his input and advice as to what colours we use. But it does really, if there are conflicting colours or there's something doesn't sit quite right, it really does affect how your eyes interact with the grid. So making sure it's aesthetically pleasing is key, but also that it aligns with your own brand guidelines. Because what you want to be able to do is whoever sees it, whether it's internal, whether you show it to a client, that it's instantly recognizable as something that you have built. It not only kind of makes it, a really nice asset and a kind of really valuable thing to have within your organization, but also showcases your capability, your consistency, your experience within the area. So it really looks just very professional. So key takeaways here is don't overcomplicate it. Think about your colours and don't have too many elements. So, and the last thing is making sure that it's really, really consistent. So if I open a playbook within the same organisation, I want it to look the same as the one I've just come out of, so that you have that consistent feel of all of the playbooks within your organisation.
Yeah, that's really key as well.
Yeah. Okay, so just touched on it there, but you may have noticed the different coloured elements within the method and also the guidance. So we have kind of 4 key building blocks that we use to form each of the method. And these are our different elements. So we have our guidance element, our activity, and our deliverable. Based on, rewind a couple of slides, that's the components of our method. And then we also have our stage gates. So these are our controls that we put in place to move from stage to stage. So I won't explain them here. What I'll do now is move into MethodGrid, move into the platform to show you what that looks like in a method. So if I open a guidance element to start with, so keep in mind as you're looking through these elements, the foundational principles that Pip outlined earlier. So we've got hierarchy, we've got classification, life cycle and themes, job, family and training, and standards. So we'll come back to life cycle and themes in a minute, but in this guidance element, we have a bit about what is this for? So what is this guidance element for? Setting the context. What are the objectives? Could include some kind of pictures that relate to the specific process. We're sat here in a guidance element explaining a theme. And And then you also have the ability to link out to specific training courses, etc. So this is just a real quick, who do I need to speak to if I need to know more? What is it for? And how does this particular stage fit into the overarching process or method? And before I jump into any more elements, I just wanted to show you the stages. So here you can see along the top, we've got our really clear, probably very recognizable stages, and then our themes that run along down the bottom. Don't think there are any surprises here. Most of these align to industry best practice. We haven't tried to reinvent the wheel, tried to keep it as simple as possible. Okay, so going back to my activity element. So purpose of this is to describe a standalone activity, or it could be one that precedes a deliverable, for example. But here we've got our description, always a description about what it is, what's it trying to achieve. And then we've got our tasks and controls. So these are kind of interactive boxes that can be ticked to help manage that particular activity through. And we also have our kind of video explainers. These are all made by us using AI to support the development of them and the content that sits within the element. So they're really applicable to what you're looking at. Links to any related deliverables. And then this is where we start to really hone in on the foundational principles that we talked about earlier. So here, as you can see, we've got our different project classification. So we've got our light, standard, and major projects. And then against each of those categories, we've got whether it's a mandatory or a discretionary product. So we can make sure that the method that we set can be flexed and customized based on your classification of your project. And it's really clear to anyone using it what should be used when. So then we move over to our RACI. So standard RACI structure, but what we have here is our set job family names that we did as our kind of exercise before, but they're consistent across the method. So there's going to be no reference to project sponsor rather than SRO or or a project director over a project sponsor. Those naming conventions and those job families are agreed, including what they're responsible for. We've got our hints and tips. So these are, from your organization to, your colleague, what are the things that might trip us up, or, how can we learn from what we've done on previous projects? And then we can link out to resources and references to continue that learning, continue that self-serve of information. Finally, the two bits here are training, so linking out to the training materials as per previous reference is keeping it all joined up with your existing assets and making sure that that user can continually learn. And then experts in the field within your organization that can help.
Yeah, I think is at the last resort, isn't it, Alice? If you have, if you've got all the knowledge and information, but you're still a little bit unsure, then at least you've got someone recognized in the firm who can give you sort of more guidance and more support. And that kind of training, that training link tends to be sort of connecting to the LMS, like Moodle. We do a lot of Moodle, don't we? And it's just connecting to those courses. So the individuals don't have to travel that far, and they can be connected to the relevant training resources that you want to signpost.
Yeah, definitely. And one last thing as we're in the activity is we mentioned it earlier around you've got two sections of your method. You've got your guidance and you've got your workflow. This here, our predecessors and our successors, is us starting to link up the workflow. So the user can then go from product or deliverable to activity to guidance and And it just tells that journey of your method. Okay, so moving into our deliverable then, our PDD. So we just looked at the preceding activity. We've now in our deliverable. Always our purpose, what is it for? But the main difference here is the tasks and controls to completing this particular activity have already been mapped out in the previous element. So this is actually what do you need in order to complete this deliverable. So we've got our templates, our best practice examples, any relevant toolkits, our quality criteria for that particular deliverable, including a bit more information about the typical format and composition. But consistently, we're looking at, okay, well, what's our tailoring guidance and what's our responsibility matrix, but still aligned to that agreed job family. And the same inputs to and inputs from what you need to know in order to build out this deliverable. So covered guidance, activity, and deliverable, but what about stage gates? So stage gates here.
I need to refresh, Alice. Maybe
Yeah. Here we are. So stage gates are these little diamonds that sit above, in between each of the stages. So if we click into this one, what we've got here is our blank template that we provide as part of Method Grid. And it just gives you a basic structure that you can then populate with information related to your organization. However, if going back to what I just said, it's really hard to start blank sheet of paper and all that. If I was to say, okay, well, I'm using our AI assistant within the tool, we can select this template and generate some content within this stage gate to just help us. So what we're doing here is getting to a point where we're 70-80% there. So SMEs can come in and then tweak what they need to align it to your particular organization. So add particular experts in, for example. But you've already got a starter on what the purpose of that particular stage gate is, what the objectives are, some questions around exit criteria, making sure all of these are done. But then you've also got the evidence that you might that is required in order to move on to the next stage. So it gives you that starting point to really accelerate the creation of your method. And that AI, the ability to create AI content isn't just for stage gates. It sits across all of the templates within guidance, deliverable, and activity that are all created from our experience of building things out.
I think that was the one thing we kind of wanted to stitch on. We've obviously we've updated these templates recently, so they're available you'll find them available within the platform. So we just thought we'd explain to you the context of how to use them, and they're designed to work both manually if you want to start from scratch, but also, yeah, like I said, they'll all support. There's an AI assisted version which generates standard queries to auto-populate that content, because really, it's about giving you guys the ability to fast track and build that playbook and launch it. We don't want you to have to wait 6 months, 9 months while you build this playbook. It's about ensuring that you can get codify it really quickly. Don't hog all your SMEs on doing it. They should just focus their time on reviewing it and really probably adding in their experience, their specific references that help it. So Alice, thank you so much for taking it, bringing it to life. Yeah, thank you very much. Right, so questions, guys. Duncan, I can see a few from you. So stages you've just shown look like management stage sequence in time, but have names that look like a bit like technical lifecycle stages. Do you handle two separate? We don't normally when we're building playbooks on that one, they are the standard stages not the typical management process based stages. They are the life cycle stages that you're going to execute, like design, build, test, deploy. And what we're trying to build with playbooks is that they are fully encompassing, that they guide people through that end-to-end journey. And then your phased incremental delivery, I think you might be talking about, it might be agile. So what we tend to advise clients, we do build sort of two different types of life cycle. One will be stage based, but if they are using and they're using sort of like a safe based method, which is project increment or program increment, what we tend to build is, there's an increment sort of stage in their playbook, and they can clone that increment for how many increments they think they're going to execute for that specific project. And the increments hold all of the kind of sprint, like the different sprints, but also what is also important with agile delivery is making sure, okay, if we are doing a release and we're doing implementation, that you can adapt the playbook to cover all of those aspects of how you want to coordinate business change, communication, marketing. All of that can be integrated within your playbook, not just within a kind of story test management type of solution. Hopefully that was good. Quick question: what's been passed? Which foundations have the biggest impact on playbooks? There's probably four. Obviously, taking time with the team to focus on the life cycle and themes is really critical. That massively accelerates your ability to build playbooks. And then it's the classification, how you're then going to integrate classification and training. You might not have all of the training assets that you need. That's fine, but you can, if you focus on, well, how can we stitch what training assets that we do have into the playbook? That's the first thing. And then you can really focus and use the team. As they use it, they'll ask you and say, look, actually, I understood what it asked me, but it would be more useful if we had a video explainer or an additional module to help us understand that. So yes, basically get your training all integrated and then use feedback from your teams to drive, okay, well, what other areas do we need to drive and help them, and slowly build out your enterprise playbook to do that.
Pip, I'd just add another one onto that, which is a bit more of a quick win, really, is making sure the job family is agreed up front. Because whether you're a project sponsor or an SRO or a project director, if you don't have those right and they're not applicable to your organization, then that's a real barrier for people. So I'm making sure that's consistent, because generally we see, SMEs building themes, and then we just need to make sure that's really aligned. So that's probably one which is quite a quick win. Do that.
Jonathan, your question, do you advocate building offline, maintaining a catalog of elements in use to track version, usage, dependencies, avoid duplication? Yeah, it comes up quite a lot. What we do advise is there's techniques in the tool, or there's features in the tool that allow you to sort of manage this. But when you're building playbooks, is try and build them so they are universal, so you can quickly adapt them for any different type of scenario. So, most playbooks that are client facing, whether you're delivering a particular proposition, they'll always have some aspect of program project delivery in it, but there may be sort of unique aspects of whether this is a particular type of service that we offer and this is how we deliver it. This might be CX transformation, this might be robotics. The solution components and that process might be different, but the fundamental base coat of project program delivery will be the same. So I think we try and advise clients is, look, don't just duplicate content for the sake of duplicating it. You can add in specific themes or lanes onto the playbook that would cover some of those other solution variants, so that you can quickly say, look, what type of solution are we delivering? Which themes are relevant? And okay, we're not doing that for you, for that client. We're not doing that for that client. Let's take them out. But then very quickly, you can build a playbook that's unique and can be tailored for that particular client. Any other questions?
So there's another one, Pip, around on an average implementation, how many people are typically involved in building out the initial playbooks, and what roles and functions are typically represented?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah.
Look, there's guidance that we do put out. Look, you can. The key to it is avoid the gang of cats scenario. If you kind of cascade this to 15, 20 people and say go and build a playbook, and we've come across it, you'll come across with a kind of haberdashery of content. Someone's written 3 lines, someone's written War and Peace, so the content variation is massive. Someone's built 20 elements and said that's it. Someone's just written it all in one element. So but you have to kind of control the authorship. So one of the things to say, look, there's always kind of a lead author, and normally that's they're appointed to a single theme and they are the lead. But there are obviously that it's not just you write in isolation. You work with that collection of SMEs to gather their input and feedback. But there's normally only a couple of individuals that have pen that can craft it. And I think also what happens now, AI, the use of AI and being able to tailor and hone the model to focus on particular resources that you want really does help you actually get that first draft very quickly. So that's important. And then, the other kind of roles, you've got to have like learning and development, HR are very common because they'll want to know exactly how the training assets and resources are stitched together. So it's kind of combination of content engineers and using HR, learning development folk to help you out. Don't know, Alice, any others?
One thing that we really try and stress when we do an implementation is that this is us starting a strategic project. So it's not just lead authors and content developers and HR, but it's also dedicated project management and then kind of the governance that sits around that, because to reduce the gang of cats type scenario. So it is really important that there is a lead and there is a single person driving it forward.
Yeah. And then I suppose only recently, and it's becoming more common, is the integrating it with marketing, business development. So if your intent is to use playbooks as a way of front of house with clients, like giving them access to their playbook, or at least showcasing how you control delivery of projects and programs or your services, it's becoming much more common that like the build of marketing assets, marketing videos, showcasing it is what we tend to build quite a lot these days. And getting business development folk and the marketing lot onboarded early is really important, and it just helps you drive momentum if they're interested as well. Because of any consulting if you can sell it, and it improves win probability that there'll be a lot of interest from clients.
Final question, Pip. Are you going to write a book about it? Or a guide on how people can go about starting off building playbooks?
Book might be a stretch too far, Alice, I think. But I think what would be useful is probably we codify it and put it into a white paper. I think it is a useful resource that says, look, if you're thinking about undertaking this, if you were to build and you start from scratch, how you build a enterprise program project delivery method, it would be quite a valuable white paper of all the things to think about. Because I think there's not too many people that have got the experience of building it for large organizations. I think me and Dom have both gone through that before, but certainly building that asset that would give people that resource would be really valuable. So I think it's something we will commit to as putting a white paper out on that.
And there's a final question from Ricardo, would you have any implementation in public sector organizations delivering capital investment projects and programs? If yes, can we share the business case?
Yes, we can. Ricardo, I can reach out. There's we just filled in the cabinet office technology code of contact. So we're just doing that with one of our clients. So I'll happy to reach out over LinkedIn, and I'll connect you guys for that project as well. And Alice, I think we're just going to about time out, and we're always quite good on timekeeping. So, But Alice, from me, thank you so much for joining us on this session. And guys, just as a final signpost, one advisory next month. So that'll be the 25th of August for 1 and 2. But guys, if this has been interesting and you want to talk about it more, please reach out on LinkedIn and connect with us. We'd be delighted to follow on the conversation. Okay, have a great weekend. I'll speak to you soon. Take care.
Bye.